Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today I am here to talk about our cultural norms when it comes to listening to music. I don't know if this is American society as a whole or if this is just a Gen Z thing or if this is more specific to younger generations, but the point is that we have an issue with how we listen to music and how we are consuming entertainment in general. And I'm here to talk today about my own experience when it comes to listening to music specifically and having noise around me, and how my habits, my goals, and the way I've approached my downtime has changed as I've gotten a little bit older. My journey when it comes to listening to music is characterized by quantity over quality. I'm currently in the process of switching that and making it quality over quantity, but for many years I was focused on listening to the maximum amount of music possible. Just having the maximum number of hours was a very realistic goal for me to set for myself, and it was also something that was easy to meet in many ways because it's not like I was setting a production goal for myself. I was just, hey, let's turn on Spotify for the maximum number of hours as possible. That doesn't exactly require me to go out and do anything as much as it just requires me to have constant noise in the background. I don't want to say that all music is just noise and background noise, but when I chose to listen to music for hours and hours and hours on end for like 10 hours a day, that is what music becomes, is just a background humming instead of being once in a while taking the time to listen to music and really appreciating it for what it was. Until a year or two ago, I paid very, very minimal attention to the energy of the music that I was listening to. And by energy, I mean, yes, the actual tempo of the music, like slow versus fast, but also the emotional energy. Like, what are the lyrics that I'm listening to? Are these about hating myself? Are these about like sadness? Are these about trauma? Or are they about being grateful and enjoying life? And I don't think that someone's musical palette should be composed of all sadness or all happy emotion, but I think that when you're leaning too heavy into one side, there starts to be a little bit of an issue. And that's what I did, specifically with the sad side of the spectrum. And I didn't really realize that when I was consuming music for hours and hours and hours on end for every day of the year, that those were the messages that I was internalizing. And at the time, I would have denied that the music that I was listening to was degrading the quality of my life. In fact, looking back on it, I don't know if it would be fair to make the claim that the music I was listening to was degrading the quality of my life. However, I would say that when I started to change up my habits, my mindset started to shift, which in turn changed how I was feeling. So after this multi-year period, the pendulum swung a little bit in the opposite direction, and I started to listen to a lot of pop music. And I'm speaking of this like it was a long time ago, but this was actually in the past year and a half. Um, but the fun music did make me look forward to, you know, getting ready in the morning, driving places in the morning. It definitely put a fun spin on my day, whereas there otherwise would have just been a sad spin on my day, frankly. And this music gave it made the messages that I was, singing in my head all day, things that weren't depressing and were, they were the opposite, and they were energetic. And that was great. It really was, until I ran out of music. In the past few months, I've been dealing with an issue that I never foresaw myself having to deal with. For the first time ever, I feel like there is not music that I want to listen to. And this is crazy. Again, remember, I used to have the maximum streaming hours on Spotify. I was always listening to something. I often had playlists of just artists that I need to listen to, like I need to get around listening to, like check it off my checklist. And that was a whole problematic way of consuming music. I was consuming music that I wasn't enjoying, and I was treating it as a checklist to listen to things. But the point is that I never foresaw myself as having too few things to listen to. I mean, you have the whole internet in your pocket, to sound like a member of Gen X. Like you really do have the whole internet in your pocket. You have the whole world in your pocket. You have music from, every culture imaginable. As of this moment right now, I would still consider myself to be in that phase of life where I really do enjoy listening to the energetic pop music, the rave music, the upbeat stuff. But I'm just struggling to find new music to listen to. I do think that this is due largely in part to Spotify's algorithm and the kind of music that they recommend to listeners, and that it's a lot of just the same like TikTok music and mainstream pop. But that's really, I'm getting all that is off the rails of the topic of this video. That is a topic for another video because I will become too impassioned to get too far off the rails. For the past 2 months, I really have felt like I have covered all of the mainstream artists. Either they're people who I've really enjoyed, like I'm gonna use Charlie XCX as an example, or they're people who, their music isn't for me. People like Lady Gaga, for example. In general, the issue that I've been facing is that I've come to be more in tuned. Haha, I didn't mean that pun. I've come to be more in tuned with the lyrics of the music that I'm listening to instead of just listening to, does this have a fast tempo or a slow tempo? I started to pay attention to the actual words that I'm singing in my head when I I'm singing these songs later in the day. Like what are the messages that I'm consuming? I'm grateful that I've become enlightened in this way and that I've become aware of the lyrics that I'm listening to, but at the same time, it's significantly decreased the amount of music that I want to listen to because I've realized how few songs are focused on messages that I actually agree with. A lot of pop music, even though it's super upbeat and super fun and super party, if you really start to listen to the lyrics, there's a lot of music about, let me just tick off the big ones. Hating yourself, being depressed, failed relationships, revenge and retaliation. That is such a big one. I'm not saying that these topics should not be sung about. That is not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying that when you really think about it, there is a lack of pop music, but also just music in general that is, preaching gratitude and happiness and the principles of a healthy lifestyle. And that sounds quite bland and holier than thou in some ways, but I don't want to be listening to music every single day about how much you hate this girl and, you're going to show her how much better you are and you hate him and you're doing this and just all this negative stuff that I never used to think of as negative. I used to think of those kind of songs as, motivation and, like revenge type songs as motivation. I'm not trying to hate on these artists that I'm going to use it as examples, but I think that they would be helpful for the point that I'm making. Take, for example, the song Good For You by Olivia Rodrigo, because that is just the first thing that came to my mind. When I listened to that song back when it was popular, back in 2021, that was a great motivation song. I felt very motivated listening to that. It's a, dance, upbeat song. Like, people enjoy that. I do see that being on so many workout playlists on Spotify, right? Like, great pump up jam, right? However, that song is literally, it's about revenge and it's about bitterness, and that's not the same as uplifting pop song. And I know that as a society we are getting those two things confused, and we're thinking that if it motivates us, if the energy and the tempo is motivating to us, then the song automatically overall just must be in motivating, uplifting piece. And that's not true. And that's what I've come to realize, and it's really impacted what music I can listen to now and what music I want to listen to now. Again, I just want to reiterate, I think that music is meant to be therapeutic. I think that you're supposed to put whatever emotion you're feeling into that, and I think that artists have every right, and I think that's where a lot of beautiful music comes from. But at the same time, it's not what I want to be listening to every day. The kind of dopamine that I feel after listening to, let's say, the theme song of Victorious versus Good For You by Olivia Rodrigo, those are completely different, and they might seem similar on the surface level, but one is rooted in hate while the other is rooted in happiness and appreciation for life in general, if that makes sense. And I want more music that's about appreciation for life in general and not about hating people, but not about these topics that I don't necessarily want to be hearing about every day and I don't want to bring into my life. This brings me to where I'm at now. Currently, I have yet to find a great new bunch of music that I really want to listen to. And for the first time ever, I have been choosing silence over listening to music. I've been choosing silence when doing my makeup or when driving to school. I'm not saying that I don't listen to music anymore, but I'm saying that I listen to it significantly less than I used to, and I listen to it with more intention than I used to. I would love to do a follow-up video, maybe 3 months down the line, and see if that has increased the appreciation for the music that I listen to, because I do foresee there being a correlation between, listening to less music and therefore appreciating what I do listen to more. So I would be very interested to do a little follow-up to see how that goes. But for now, I've been trying to savor the experience of the silence, and taking time to think thoughts. And that sounds quite surface level, but the truth is that when you have all those inputs, your mental capacity goes down by a significant amount. And I am not a psychologist, so I could not tell you the exact statistics, but I can tell you my own experience. When you're listening to music, you're distracted, especially if it has lyrics, and you can't focus like you could, and you can't think and have a strong train of thought like you could in silence, even though I thought you could for a very long time. If anyone has ever read the book Fahrenheit 451, which I would assume that many people have, in that the main character's wife, she's always watching something on her TV and on her screens. Forgive me that I don't know the exact details of the book. It's been a hot minute since I've read it, but that is how I feel when I try to have meaningful thoughts while I'm listening to music, because I have all these inputs and it's taking away my ability to think for myself and actually connect different thoughts. And that's why I've taken to like being in silence, which I couldn't sit in silence before, like a few months ago. So I'm just trying to appreciate that experience, especially because creatively, your best ideas come when you just let your mind wander and you're making these connections that you're never going to have the mental capacity to make while you're listening to music, or it's going to be a lot more rare than it is if you're just actually devoting time to thinking. And that sounds quite minimalistic, like, wow, just me and my thoughts in the world, but in reality, it is where inspiration strikes, to sound a little bit cliche. And I would just encourage others to evaluate not only what you're listening to, but how often you're listening to it, and considering if a change would be beneficial. I hope that my experience was relatable, or if not, that it was informative and maybe helped you to think a little bit differently about your own habits. I hope that everyone has a great rest of their morning, afternoon, evening, day, week, year, and that you check out some of my other videos if you liked this video. See you guys in the next one. Bye!